It started with a single sentence, broadcast from Rome, but aimed straight at Beijing. May our prayer embrace all people suffering from war. But behind this solemn call, something seismic was unfolding. Just days ago, Pope Leo XIV sent what many are calling a spiritual SOS, a message of unity and communion, to over 12 million Catholics inside one of the world's most tightly controlled nations, China. Was it a gesture of peace, or the opening shot in a deeper power struggle? Why are underground bishops, communist officials, and the Vatican suddenly tangled in one of the most dangerous religious flashpoints of our time? And could the most surprising detail be that Pope Leo's message wasn't just spiritual, but strategic? You're about to uncover 10 powerful revelations behind Pope Leo's bold appeal to China's faithful, and why some say it could define his entire papacy. Let's begin with number 10. Number 10. Who is Pope Leo XIV, and why his words matter now? A fresh face, but not a new voice. When Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost became Pope Leo XIV, many insiders whispered, he's the continuity candidate. But just weeks into his papacy, that whisper is turning into global debate. On the surface, Pope Leo speaks with gentleness, invoking prayer, unity, and peace. But those close to him know, behind that calm demeanor lies the heart of a strategist. His first major public message wasn't about Vatican reform or the environment. It was about China. And that choice? Anything but random. Here's the moment that stunned even veteran Vatican analysts. Just before delivering his May 24th prayer from the Apostolic Palace window, Pope Leo received a small, handcrafted gift from Hong Kong's Cardinal Stephen Chow, a cross carved from olive wood, discreetly inlaid with jade. That jade wasn't just a nod to Chinese culture, it was a signal. Why? Because jade, long revered in Chinese tradition as a symbol of endurance and purity, was Cardinal Chow's way of telling Pope Leo, the faithful here are still standing. But they're hurting. And Pope Leo heard that message loud and clear. As successor to Pope Francis, Pope Leo inherits a legacy of diplomacy with Beijing that's as fragile as glass. But unlike his predecessor, Pope Leo's opening moves suggest he's not just maintaining that relationship, he's redefining it. In a single sentence, may our prayer embrace all people suffering from war, he positioned China's underground and state-sanctioned Catholics not as political pawns, but as spiritual siblings torn apart. That subtle shift is monumental. Historically, few popes have spoken so directly about China's faithful so early in their reign. Yet here was Pope Leo, not just acknowledging them, but praying with them. And he's doing it while tensions are rising, not falling. But is this prayer the beginning of reconciliation? Or the spark that reignites a centuries-old conflict? Coming up next, the moment Beijing began to push back. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9. The Statue of Shiishan, a silent plea for unity. It was small, easily missed by cameras and political commentators. But for over 12 million Catholics in China, it was thunderous. When Cardinal Stephen Chow handed Pope Leo XIV a statue of Our Lady of Shiishan, it wasn't just a diplomatic gesture. It was a cry. The Shiishan image, Mary with her arms raised heavenward, lifting the infant Christ, isn't just sacred. In Chinese Catholic life, it's defiance cloaked in devotion. The hill of Shiishan, just outside Shanghai, holds a basilica that stood as a refuge through dynasties, persecutions, and revolutions. For over a century, pilgrims have climbed its steep steps, even when doing so was banned or dangerous. The Shiishan Madonna became their symbol of silent endurance, and now, in the hands of Pope Leo, it becomes a beacon of papal alignment with their suffering. The Pope's response? Subtle, yet seismic. He didn't deliver a speech. He didn't pose for a photo op. He bowed his head. That moment, a quiet nod, was interpreted by many in China's underground churches as recognition. Recognition of decades spent in secrecy. Of masses held in basements. Of catechism whispered under threat. The message from Rome was clear: you are not forgotten. For a church often split between state-approved congregations and hidden communities loyal to the Vatican, the statue carried sharp symbolism. By accepting it, Pope Leo placed himself at the center of a long unspoken debate: who truly leads the Church in China, the state, or Rome? And here's the deeper tension. The Chinese government has long tried to separate patriotism from papal loyalty. But Shiishan, named in every Vatican prayer for China, is an emblem of that unbroken tie. Could this Marian symbol, quietly handed from one leader to another, spark renewed unity, or sharpen the divide between underground believers and the state's grip? Up next, China's officials respond. And their reaction? Anything but silent. Number 8. The 2018 Vatican-China deal, or unity or compromise. It was one of the most controversial diplomatic decisions in recent church history, a handshake cloaked in secrecy. In 2018, the Vatican and Beijing struck a deal. The Chinese government could propose candidates for bishop, but the Pope retained final approval. The intention? Unity. The outcome? Deep division. Many hailed the agreement as a pragmatic step toward normalizing Catholic life in China, where decades of underground worship had left the faithful isolated and often persecuted. But to others, especially in China's shadow church, it felt like betrayal. Cardinal Joseph Zen called it a spiritual surrender, warning that the Holy See was handing sacred authority to an atheistic regime. Then came the shocker. Just days before the conclave that elected Pope Leo XIV, China unilaterally appointed bishops without Vatican consent, a defiant move signaling their disregard for even the limited boundaries of the 2018 deal. It wasn't just political overreach, it was sacramental overstep. For many underground Catholics, it confirmed their worst fears, that Rome's silence was being mistaken for surrender. That the shepherds in Beijing might soon be wolves' investments. Now, with the deal up for renewal and unauthorized appointments on record, all eyes are on Pope Leo. Will he double down on compromise, hoping to pull the state church closer to Rome, or will he defend the underground faithful and risk severing diplomatic ties? The question isn't just political, it's theological. Who gets to lay hands on a bishop? Who speaks for the Church in China? Coming up, Pope Leo's Vatican inner circle is divided. And one cardinal's warning could change everything. Number 7. World Day of Prayer for the Church in China, a legacy of Benedict XVI. May 24th may look like just another day on the church calendar, but it carries a hidden weight, a plea for unity born in silence and suffering. It was Pope Benedict XVI who instituted the World Day of Prayer for the Church in China, choosing the Feast of Our Lady, Help of Christians, a title deeply venerated by Chinese Catholics. His vision was bold, to spiritually unite the two estranged Catholic communities in China, the underground church, loyal to Rome, and the state-sanctioned church, overseen by Beijing. But for years, that vision seemed forgotten. Then, on May 24, 2025, Pope Leo XIV reignited it with global force. From the balcony at St. Peter's, his voice trembled not with politics, but pastoral love. We pray, he said, for our brothers and sisters in China, that they may remain in communion with the universal church. From Africa to Argentina, Catholics lit candles. Underground communities in Henan whispered prayers, their faces lit only by candlelight and hope. It wasn't just a memorial, it became a movement. Yet the rift remains real. For every act of prayer, there are fresh reports of arrests. For every papal message, there's silence from Beijing. And yet, in that gap, the Church dares to hope. So we ask you, do you believe the Church can heal this wound in our lifetime? Drop a comment below. Coming next, behind Vatican walls, the Pope's advisors are split. Should the Holy See call out China more forcefully, or continue the slow work of diplomacy in silence? Number 6. Strong and joyful witnesses, the cost of Catholicism in China. What does it cost to be Catholic in China? For many, the answer is silence, exile, or even a jail cell. Just days before the World Day of Prayer for the Church in China, one underground bishop, whose name cannot be safely shared, vanished. His disappearance isn't unusual. Dozens of clergy faithful to Rome are monitored, detained, or re-educated by state authorities. For underground Catholics, loyalty to the Pope is often treated as subversion. Yet Pope Leo XIV didn't flinch. In his address on May 24, he did something deeply countercultural. He asked the world to pray that China's Catholics remain strong and joyful. Not just faithful, joyful. This wasn't a diplomatic maneuver. It was a spiritual plea rooted in decades of Catholic suffering, echoing the courage of martyrs who chose Christ over comfort. His words reached far beyond St. Peter's Square. In house churches from Guangzhou to Gansu, believers clung to the Pope's message like a lifeline. A woman whose husband has been imprisoned since 2018 for organizing unauthorized masses whispered, "We are not forgotten." This day of prayer was never about politics, it's about people. Families torn apart. Clergy disappearing. Children baptized in secret. And through it all, a strange resilience, joy in persecution, hope in the dark. Why did that bishop disappear so close to the day of prayer? Was it coincidence, or a chilling warning? Next up, will Pope Leo take a firmer stance, or does prayer remain the most powerful weapon the Church can offer China? Number 5. Pope Leo's hidden message about global conflict. May our prayer embrace all people suffering from war. At first, it sounded like a simple, heartfelt prayer. But to seasoned Vatican watchers, this moment landed with surprising weight. Pope Leo XIV was doing more than offering spiritual support, he was drawing a global map of pain and solidarity. And doing it without naming a single nation. From the ravaged streets of Gaza to the scorched villages in Sudan, from the frozen trenches in Ukraine to displaced families in Myanmar, Pope Leo was speaking to all, and for all. In a world choked by partisanship and diplomatic paralysis, the Pope's invocation of Mary as Queen of Peace wasn't mere piety. It was a moral stance, one that subtly echoed the boldness of Pope John Paul II during the Cold War. John Paul's 1979 visit to Poland sparked a spiritual resistance that helped erode the Iron Curtain. Could Leo be planting seeds of peace through prayer, where politics have hardened into stalemate? His words weren't thunderous, they were disarming. And therein lies their power. The Vatican isn't sending troops or issuing sanctions. But when the Pope publicly includes all people suffering from war, without geopolitical bias, he's shifting the Church's voice into a position of prophetic neutrality and deep moral urgency. Was this why some analysts quietly compared Leo's prayer to John Paul's 1981 address in Victory Square? Coming up, will Pope Leo's prayerful diplomacy translate into real Vatican initiatives, or was this a singular moment of moral clarity? Number 4. Bless Stannislaw strike, the martyr China may echo. Just one day before his Regina Caeli address, Pope Leo XIV oversaw the beatification of Fr. Stanislaw Strike, a little-known Polish priest murdered in 1938. He was gunned down in odium fidei, in hatred of the faith, by a communist sympathizer who saw his defense of the poor and his outspoken Catholic convictions as threats to the new regime. But why would Pope Leo bring him up during a prayer for China? That connection is anything but coincidental. Pope Leo is drawing a quiet, powerful parallel. Blessed Stanislaw gave his life not just for his beliefs, but for daring to live those beliefs publicly, something China's underground clergy still wrestle with today. Their masses remain hidden. Their bishops often go unrecognized by Beijing. Surveillance is constant. Arrest is always possible. By elevating Fr. Stanislaw into the Universal Church's spotlight, Pope Leo isn't just canonizing the past. He's warning the present. The message is implicit, but unmistakable. The blood of martyrs flows through history, and may soon flow again if religious repression continues. Historians have already noted eerie similarities between 1930s Poland and 2020s China: authoritarian oversight, anti-Christian ideology, and clerical resistance marked not by protest, but by prayer, poverty, and perseverance. So here's the unsettling question: was Pope Leo preparing the Church for a coming wave of Chinese martyrdoms, or is there still time to change the ending? Number 3. Laudato Si and the cry for justice. The cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. That was the heart of Pope Francis' 2015 encyclical Laudato Si, and now, on its 10th anniversary, Pope Leo XIV resurrects that cry with renewed urgency. During his Regina Caeli message, Pope Leo didn't simply commemorate an environmental document. He reframed it. In his voice was a subtle shift. This wasn't just about climate. It was about conscience. Pollution, he said, is inseparable from persecution. The exploitation of land and the suppression of human dignity are twin violations, and both, he implied, are playing out in real time on Chinese soil. Consider China's dual crisis: ecological degradation and religious oppression. On one hand, the country faces deadly air pollution, poisoned rivers, and desertification. On the other, its Catholic population, especially those loyal to Rome, worships in fear, silence, and secrecy. For Pope Leo, these aren't separate issues. They're the same wound bleeding from different places. His message was clear: Catholicism is not a compartmentalized faith. It's global. It's political. It's ecological. And it's prophetic. To defend the environment is to defend the poor. To speak for persecuted believers is to speak for creation itself. The Church, he suggests, must see these issues as spiritually entangled. This is more than theory. In past eras, the Church's moral voice reshaped unjust systems, slavery, apartheid, even war. Could the next moral frontier be where environmental justice meets religious freedom? And so the question rises: will this papacy lead a unified Catholic response to China's dual crisis, or will the cries of the earth and the poor be drowned out once again? Number 2. The Vatican's 70-year rift with China. Can Leo heal the wound? It began in 1951. Mao Zedong's communist regime cut ties with the Holy See, declaring all foreign religious influence illegal. In one decree, the Vatican lost not just diplomatic presence, but its authority to name bishops in China. The state created its own Catholic association, loyal not to Rome, but to Beijing. Faithful Catholics were forced to choose state allegiance or sacramental authenticity. Decades passed. Popes came and went. Underground churches grew, sometimes brutally suppressed. Then came Pope Francis, who dared to try a handshake. In 2018, his Vatican reached a provisional agreement with China on bishop appointments, an act some called historic, others naive. It gave Rome a consultative role, but many underground Catholics saw it as a betrayal. Could Beijing be trusted to respect religious conscience? Now enters Pope Leo XIV. A canon lawyer by training, a pastor by heart. He inherits the tightrope Francis once walked. But early signs show Leo isn't here to tiptoe. In his very first Regina Caeli, he addressed Chinese Catholics directly, offering solidarity, pleading for communion with Rome, and calling for unity in unmistakably clear terms. It was bold. And risky. Because every word to China's Catholics is also a challenge to China's authorities. History offers a precedent. In the 11th century, Pope Gregory VII defied emperors to reclaim the Church's freedom to name bishops. That confrontation sparked the investiture controversy and reshaped the relationship between Church and state forever. Could Leo be stepping into a similar storm? As the tension mounts, the world watches. Will this papacy mark reconciliation, or the beginning of a new ecclesial standoff with one of the world's most powerful governments? Number 1. A papacy defined by China? What grabbed the world's attention wasn't simply that Pope Leo XIV mentioned China in his first major public address, it was how he did it. Instead of political grandstanding or diplomatic posturing, he spoke with deep spiritual tenderness. His focus was on prayer, communion, and witness, the pillars of faith that transcend borders and regimes. In the Cold War era, the Church confronted communism with sharp rhetoric, viewing it as an ideological enemy. But today, Pope Leo's approach feels different, more courageous in a spiritual sense than a strategic one. He seems to embrace the challenge not as a battle of politics but as a call to steadfast faith amid persecution and silence. His words echoed with compassion for Chinese Catholics, many of whom suffer in obscurity, torn between loyalty to Rome and pressure from Beijing. By praying for unity and communion, he reminds the faithful worldwide that the Church is one body, even when fractured by external forces. But the question looms large: will Pope Leo build on the fragile 2018 agreement brokered by his predecessor, or will he boldly rewrite that chapter? The future of the Church's relationship with China hangs in the balance, and with it, perhaps, the next defining moment of this papacy. The unfolding story asks us to watch closely, because whatever comes next may shape the global Church's role in a world still divided by ideology and faith. What we've witnessed today is more than just a historic message. Pope Leo XIV's words to China might well become the defining heartbeat of his entire papacy. From the silent prayers beneath Marian icons to the courageous witness of martyred priests, from the secret, underground churches that persist despite pressure, to the Pope's public call for unity and faith, this story resonates deeply with the soul of the Church itself. It is a reminder that faith often flourishes most vividly where it is tested the hardest. The Church in China endures behind walls both literal and ideological, yet it remains a living, breathing community of believers whose spiritual light cannot be extinguished. Pope Leo's embrace of this struggle reveals a papacy shaped not by power politics, but by spiritual solidarity and hope. As we close, consider this: in a world where walls divide, prayer still crosses every barrier. It unites the faithful across oceans, borders, and regimes. This papacy's journey with China is far from over, and the next chapters may hold profound lessons about resilience, faith, and reconciliation. If you believe the Church must always stand with the persecuted and the faithful who worship in the shadows, like, comment, and share this story. And don't forget to subscribe for more bold, untold stories from Catholic history and papal diplomacy. Because sometimes, prayer is the most powerful bridge we have.